The design-build finance approach places responsibilities for project financing as well as the engineering, design, and construction with the contractor. The city is not required to make any payments until construction is substantially completed. In this way, the contractor has an incentive to complete the project as expeditiously as possible. This can achieve further schedule compression. The DBFOM, on the other hand, adds to that approach the operations and maintenance component, and that is typically done by way of contract, and there will be ongoing financing costs that will have to be paid over the concession term of the contract, which is typically over a 30-year period.
And can you explain between the two methods how, and if there is a difference, how they would impact our debt to ratio? If there is a difference between the two financing methods?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So under the traditional approach, we would be paying the contractor progress payments, and so the likelihood is that our debt targets would be impacted because, as you know, we're reaching that 15% limit sooner than later.
Yep.
However, with the AFP approach, we're not paying any progress payments. We only make the payment at substantial completion, which we estimate to be at about 2023, 2024.
So this gives us more space for other projects, and with the low interest rates, we can actually...
Yes, it helps us with our debt targets.
Okay.
And then I want to ask about just some clarification on the report. The first page in the second paragraph, it talks about, in the middle, it says recommended approach involves a 30-year operation. Concession period, this is going to add significantly to the amount of the contract. And then the next paragraph, very next paragraph down, it says the city can save at least 16% of an estimated $500 million over the life of a 30-year contract rehabilitation. So are those two not conflicting with each other?
No. So the design, build, finance, operate, maintain approach requires that the contractor or project co maintain the asset over a long period of time, a concession period of about 30 years. And so what we'd like to do, rather than pay everything at substantial completion, we'd like to have them incentivized to perform post-completion. And so what we do is we only pay 85% of the cost, we withhold 15%, and we pay that out over a 30-year period, ensuring that they actually perform according to the contract with respect to operations and maintenance. And so that's a technique, if you will, to ensure that there's a proper warranty in place for that asset to perform well post-completion.
Right. And then the total contract value, I guess that's the same question I had kind of previously. The last paragraph on this page, it says the contract value is expected to be approximately $3.8 billion, but on page 4 it refers to a $2.4 billion contract.
Yes, the capital costs are actually $2.4 billion, but the value of the contract... 2.6 billion. The value of the contract itself, because there will be payments over a 30-year period, increases to 3.8. Less the expected federal contribution of $800 million would result in a net city cost, if you will, of $3 billion. Now, again, those are nominal dollars. Those are to be paid over close to a 40-year time horizon. We're factoring in the 6 years of construction plus 30 years of a concession payment, so 36 years. So these are nominal dollars, but we wanted to give committee and council an appreciation of the magnitude of the contract once they see it 2 years from now, once we proceed with the RFP and the award.
Okay, and then just my last question. So you're expecting there's a reference, that losing bidders will probably have to pay them close to $10 million for their work.
So the industry norm is that the winning bid compensates the losing bidders. We expect that we would shortlist 3 or 4, and that's again built into the price of the bid, the winning bid. So yes, $10 million is an industry norm to compensate losing bidders. And the rationale behind that is that these bidders incur considerable costs in coming up with the design and the due diligence before they make the bids. And so we want to attract, relatively robust bidders, and the way to do that is to compensate them in the event that they lose.
That brings us next to Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I just noticed that originally it was meant to, I think, take about 20 years, and now you're saying close to 6. That's very impressive. How is that possible?
Through the chair, if you recall when we submitted our report last year on the strategic rehabilitation plan, using conventional construction approaches as we are currently for the west deck, it was envisioned that it would take us 20 years of traffic impacts to undertake all that was necessary for the elevated and the at-grade section. When we recommended using the accelerated approach, one of the advantages in using that approach was not only was it a quicker construction period for the elevated section, but what we would effectively be doing is marrying the needs of the elevated section with that at the at-grade. So one set of traffic restrictions would be supporting 2 sets of construction projects, and hence the acceleration to 12 years. Speaking to the industry, as we noted earlier on, the industry feels that by bundling the full scope of the project from 427 over to the DVP, they feel that there's further efficiencies that could be derived by undertaking this from start to finish as a 6-year project with no breaks in between.
Wow, that's great. And then there's a bit of sticker shock with the price, but at the end of the day, we're looking like we're saving about $500 million. How is that possible? Or how does that work, I guess?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, that's the product of the value for money analysis that was conducted by IO and Ernst & Young, and it suggests that by bundling the project, by having the private sector's money at risk, there is a built-in incentive for them to deliver the project on budget and ahead of schedule. And the difference between that approach versus the conventional approach, the value for money analysis suggests that there could potentially be a savings of upwards of $500 million.
Okay, thank you.
So really what we're looking at, we're going to have a big upfront cost to be able to do the P3 model, but the savings will be spread out over the life of the contract of approximately 30 years. Was that correct?
So the savings will accrue if you look at it from a present value perspective, yes, there is a savings, and I think we indicated that savings could potentially be up to $500 million. And that is really the differentiation between the AFP approach and the traditional approach.
Okay, and I'm looking on page 27, the project timeline. So if we begin this process, the construction will take place, could be done by 2023, 2024. So we don't make any payments for those first 6 years, and then on that 6th year, we'll have a very large capital payment to make, which I believe is at 85%. Was that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. The payment would be made upon substantial completion. It would be approximately 85% of the capital costs. That would be made roughly in 2023, 2024.
Okay. And how much of and I know the numbers there, I looked at it, but on our 10-year capital plan for the Gardiner, how much was that, and how much is the difference if we went with the DBFOM? So the bottom line, how much more is this actually going to cost us that we'll have to finance in 2024?
So the capital program presently contains a cash flow of $960 million over the next 10 years. We project that if you proceed with an AFP, for that same time period, the number would be $1.43 billion. But it's layered towards the end of the 10-year capital program, and so it doesn't really impact our debt thresholds, the 15% debt threshold that you, Councillor, I'm sure is aware of.
Yeah, so, and I guess the question is, you know, we can do this, we won't have an impact for about 6 years, but what, have you looked at what the 6-year outlook will be? I haven't seen the figures or anything myself, but what are we looking at in 6 years to be able to achieve this, especially on the capital, well, definitely on the capital side?
So all of that analysis will be sent to the Budget Committee, but one can assume that by not proceeding with a DBB approach, where you're making progress payments between now and 6 years from now, then you're freeing up room in the capital budget over that time period. However, you're going to be bound to pay something more in the latter part of the 10-year capital plan.
Okay.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Min Wong.
The risk assigned, how much risk are we, what is the private sector assuming in terms of risk? Is it about 300 million? Is that the risk?
So we've identified the premium that one would have to pay
300 million.
is about 315 million.
350 million. So the cost of that, that's what they take, and it's kind of, what we're doing here is we're getting on-time delivery, on-budget delivery, and so they are saying they're going to assume that risk, and that price is $350 million on a total price of the project is
3.8 billion.
3.8. So that's the price they're charging, and so they could end up being winners or they could end up being losers on that piece. But that really is the arrangement for getting something built on time and on budget. Yes.
In effect, one is paying a premium to ensure that delivery of the project is on time and on budget.
When can we reduce traffic and congestion for families 45 minutes a day? Now, certainly, we've made a lot of progress on this, Council, with regard to congestion in the core. That's carving off like 5 minutes here, 3 minutes there. Very important, very significant. But so, without this report and this work that was actually started in the last term of Council, we would have been looking at a construction project that was going to last 2 decades. And now we're actually hearing today that we can compress it to 6 years, which is still a lot of time of work that has to get done. But we are taking 14 years off a capital project, which is remarkable in terms of progress. So just simply in terms of doing that alone, that is something that we actually really need to do, get through Council, and it will be a significant accomplishment for all of us.